so I can see a little more.
Yep.
You go.
Can we get a thumbs up if you guys can hear us?
Hello, hello. Sounds good.
All right, awesome.
Perfect. I see snail trails on, sweet guys.
Heck yeah.
Mr. Rob. Right on, a lot of folks.
Piling up in there. Cool, we got the Land Cruiser Club of Wyoming. Wonder if that's Drew. Oh, that would be Montana. I'm silly.
See Mr. Paul on there from ATC. Dan says, nice place. Dan, we're about 35 feet from your desk.
We didn't do anything to it, though, to prank you or anything like that.
Yet. We go time?
All right, I think so. Just going to double check some stuff here, make sure we're good. Okay, cool.
Matt says, nice shirt, Jackson. It is a nice shirt. He wears it well. I was going to wear it first, Matt, and then he showed up in it. So, and we should be doing it from, yeah, Brian, you're right. We should have been inside of a vehicle.
Oh, that would have been a good one. Next time, 2026.
Mm-hmm. This is not Jay's Lino Garage, Tyler. Good question. This is the Land Cruiser Heritage Museum here in Salt Lake. So if you haven't been here, you need to come visit. We'll talk about that in a minute.
You think maybe we should like give them a little pan, lift the camera up?
Man, I don't know if you'll ever get that thing back to where it goes. Let's do it at the end.
Okay, good
Yeah, stick around to the end. We'll do a quick little pan virtual tour.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it looks like we got some folks piling up. We'll get things kicked off. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here on this little webinar for Cruise Moab Trail Leadership. My name's Jackson Philby. I've been going to Cruise Moab for, I don't know, 15 years or so at this point, maybe close to that. 2011, I think. How about you, Kurt?
I need to go back and do the math. I think I've only missed one or two Cruise Moab since about 1998 or 99. I think I've missed one Cruise Moab that I can remember, that recall. So pretty much every year since then. I don't know. Do the math. 25 years, call it.
Cool. I've been leading trails for about 10 years and at Cruise Moab, and then super lucky that I get to do this professionally as well. And so, yeah, what about you?
Yeah, similar. I've been doing the same run. This is probably, I've got a 13th year of the San Rafael Swell Overnighter. But before that, the Wasatch Cruisers, who is our local Salt Lake chapter here. Shout out to all the Wasatch guys. See a few on there. We did Hotel Rock and Arch Canyon before that, so I was involved. And I've also led Hell's Revenge. I've led Moab Rim one year. I've done a handful of others, but the last 10, call it, I've pretty much exclusively done the San Rafael Swell because we're there for a few days.
Awesome, awesome. I keep getting distracted because right in front of me is the biggest TV I've ever seen in my life, showing off the brand new Land Cruiser. So
I got to stop. Daniels, his name says, show us the real background. Daniel, these are real Land Cruisers all around me here. This is a very real background.
All right. So I think this is the 27th year of Cruise Moab, official year of Cruise Moab. Someone on there, correct me if I'm wrong. I just kind of peeled that out of my brain. And super pumped for it. It's going to be a great event as usual. We're back at Old Spanish Trail Arena. We'll have some camping there and some fun shenanigans, obviously, in the evening, including an awesome vendor night and all that stuff. Throughout this whole spiel, it really works well if you guys ask questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them the best of our ability or make something up. Kurt will make something up. He's better at making stuff up than I am.
True story.
We've got a little agenda that we'll rock through. But again, this works best if you're asking questions and we can answer anything specifically. So we'll run through kind of like the gist of, on Kurt and I's opinion on what makes a good trail leader for Cruise Moab. We'll talk about the documentation you have to fill out as a trail leader. So we'll talk about our Garmin inReaches, which is kind of like the basis of our emergency communication system. Talk about leader preparedness, what you should have in your vehicle, some trail etiquette, of course, a lot of tread lightly stuff. We'll give some tips and tricks to keep things moving for spotting. If you have to do a recovery, obviously we're not going to teach recovery. We're just going to try and help you think through it. We'll talk about what you should talk about in your driver's meeting, what you should be doing as a trail leader throughout the day, and then of course airing up and all that kind of stuff, and how to handle those situations when you're done with the trail and you're waving goodbye to the folks that were on the trail with you.
Yeah, and the goal here is not to intimidate anyone into like, oh my goodness, there's so many things I have to do to be a trail leader. Quite the opposite, is really just get you prepared to have a good, functional, and fun run, and check all the boxes on the things that are required for Cruise Moab because of the insurance and the paperwork and the check-in. But then get that out of the way first thing in the morning. We'll talk about that, and then have a great trail ride and have some things to share with those that are following behind you. And hopefully they all get back. The plan is they all get back with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
Cruise Moab documentation.
Do you want to talk about a little bit more about what makes a good Cruise Moab trail leader?
Okay. In my opinion, a good trail leader, one that's been on the trail before. I think there are few exceptions with trails in the greater Moab area that you could probably just show up and follow the painted lines on the ground. But it's going to be best if you've had an opportunity to run that trail before. And that may even be going down a couple days early to Cruise Moab, or maybe the day before, after you, before your trail ride, you go and do a quick pre-run on that one. And generally speaking, in a small group, or if you had one or two of you, you could get through one of those pretty quick. Ideally, you've done that in the weeks or months ahead of the trip. But that way you know some of the spotlights of the trail, things like where are we going to be meeting? That's going to be usually back in town, but you're going to likely need a muster again once you get to the trailhead, because you'll leave town in your organized meeting spot and you're going to get separated. Traffic lights, some vehicles are moving a little faster, slower than others. So where are you going to regroup at the trailhead? Where are you going to air down at the trailhead? And kind of be looking at a spot that's not going to slow down other users that are going to be coming and going from the trail. While we're permitted to be using all these trails, particularly on BLM and state land, we don't have exclusive use of them. So it's not appropriate to pull up to the trailhead, get everybody lined up on the beginning of it, and block that trail for the next 30 minutes while you sign everybody in and air down.
Okay, sorry. I thought we had some questions there, but it looks like we're still rocking and rolling. How many participants will be there? I think, it looks like Matt got that hammered out. 275 folks this year we have.
Wow.
Registered. So
fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Mr.
awesome.
Matt.
So what makes a good trail leader?
Got to air down. Yeah. And I'm diving in a little deep, but that's okay.
No,
that's the whole plan. Why don't you pick up? So we've got to where you air down spot. Then what about on the trail?
Yeah, I was going to go more, Kurt's the detail guy. I was going to go a little more high level and say that, number one, it's supposed to be fun for you as well. And it is, because you get to stay in front of all the dust. But I find that the folks behind me tend to match my attitude and energy. And undoubtedly, some of you guys are going to run into some traffic out there. And if you stay calm and cool and at least act like you're having fun, your participants that are behind you are going to, have more fun. So stay cool out there. Remember that that as a trail leader, you're kind of the face of Cruise Moab. And so everything you do as a trail leader also reflects on Cruise Moab. And so as you run into other folks out there on the trail, as you deal with little maybe issues with participants, remembering that you're a part of this awesome big picture can be helpful when you're kind of starting to lose your nerve a little bit.
True story. So Jackson's was a much higher level than I was looking at. I was diving into the details. We'll dive back on mine in a moment here. I mean, I guess we could kind of kick off. We've talked about what makes a good trail leader. Why don't you pick up your beautiful packet? Because that's the first thing that's going to happen is the check-in and the paperwork.
So our trail boss, Lisa Jordan, and a whole bunch of folks get together and start putting together, before we ever make it to Cruise Moab, your trail leader packet. And it's going to look something like this. Hopefully everyone can kind of see that. It'll have a little checklist on here. And if everything goes right, you'll have picked this up the night before your trail run. And it's going to contain a lot of paperwork inside of it. And so we'll start jamming through this. You want to divide and conquer this?
You bet. Andrew, to answer your question, checklist. You were asking if we could get you a checklist. There will be one right on the packet. So great question, but you'll have one that kind of nails down everything you got to jam on.
All right, cool. I'm going to peel out some of this stuff. Let you handle that.
You bet.
And then, all right. So we'll jump right in here. There's a
registration roster.
Yep.
Okay.
And let me see if.
Well, that's on the top of the checklist, so I'll start. So the very first thing on the checklist is going to tell you the number of trucks on your run. That's not necessarily going to be number of people, because it's certainly possible that there's anywhere between at least one, we hope, per vehicle, but up to could be 5 or 6. They all need to be in seat belts. So as a trail leader, great idea for you to kind of walk down through that line as you greet and meet everybody and make sure there's appropriate amount of seats and seat belts for the number of passengers they have in their group. But the Cruise Moab packet is going to have a really nice checklist. I don't need to get into the details of what this one has as far as the names, but it's going to have the attendee's first and last name, a phone number, a vehicle, and even like year and color of that vehicle. So you have a pretty good idea of who's supposed to be showing up to your meeting spot. And that's kind of an important thing to get this out. And this is your copy to make marks on if you'd like to. There are pens in the packets as well, but not a bad idea to have a few spares with you. And you're literally just going to go through there and put a little check or some kind of mark saying, hey, they're here. And you're welcome to make little notes so that you can tally everybody as they show up. Now, there's always the tough call of how long do I wait for somebody at the trailhead or at the arranged meeting spot, more importantly, before we roll out as a group. Did you have a thought on that? What's your opinion?
I'm a call out on the radio a couple times on the frequency that everyone's supposed to be on, but try to leave on time.
Yeah, absolutely. You especially if it's one person, there's a chance they're not going to make it. If you haven't seen them 5 and 10 minutes before your departure time, you do have a phone number on the sheet for a cell phone that they've provided. Why don't you see if you can give them a call, or maybe delegate that to somebody in your group to say, hey, would you mind trying to call this person? But I agree with Jackson. It's my opinion that you've got 15 ready to go. Why make everybody wait because one hasn't shown up? And that's kind of a reminder for everybody, even if you're not a trail leader and you're on this webinar listening in tonight, make sure you're on time for your trail. And by on time, be early so there's time to fill out your paperwork so everybody can get out and have a great day.
Yep, you got it.
So that covers the people. Insurance waivers are next.
Yeah. So in your trail leader packet, you're going to have some waivers. Some look like this, with a whole bunch of lines to fill out. So if you're a driver or if you're over the age of 18 and you're on a trail run, you should sign your name on this, including trail leaders and trail gunners. So before your welcome to the trail speech, you're gonna have all of your participants fill this out. If you have folks on your run that are under 18, you're gonna have them fill out this whole page, front and back. And then once everybody's signed all that stuff, you just pack that up, put it back in the packet, and we'll remove it once you turn your packet back in. So you don't need to do anything else with these waivers after you have them signed and put back in your packet.
And I like to use your roster as a perfect way to document everybody has signed the waivers. So check them in once they're there and you've seen them in line, but also maybe put a little W there or something else, let them know. 2 more points, because some great points came up. Matt Farm from Rising Sun mentioned there are Google map links to all of the meeting locations provided. So it's going to be really easy. As a trail leader, I think you got to go to that spot the night before or early on in your trip and look at what that layout looks like. Hey, how should we pull in so that we can all leave together and not get separated? Have a little idea. And Neil Quigley, Mr. Neil, good to hear from you, mentioned that not a bad idea if you talk to somebody on the phone, they say, hey, sorry, I forgot to get gas, or what the excuse is, I'm running 5 or 10 minutes behind, leave your tail gunner behind to gather up that last person and meet you back at the trailhead or wherever you're going to be airing down for the trail. So you can divide and conquer a little bit within reason. Make sure your trail gunner knows where to get to the trail as well. But we want to be inclusive. And so, yeah, if you got to wait a few minutes or have somebody wait, your tail gunner is the perfect person to be doing that.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about what a tail gunner is in a bit here.
All right. So more stuff that's in your packet.
Accident forms.
Yeah. So heaven forbid something happens on the trail. It's better to document it. If you do or don't know if it should be documented, it's better to fill this accident form out, and we'll figure, as the Cruise Moab committee, we'll figure out what else needs to happen after this. But this is really important if you have to do some kind of police report or do something like that. Having this documentation filled out immediately is very helpful.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, more on the packet. So every now and again out there, we run into rangers or folks that would like to see that we are an official permitted event in Moab, which is a really cool thing. So if somebody from the county stops by, you'll have a certificate in there that looks something like this that says, hey, we did our due diligence and the county says we're cool to roll.
Thank you.
Those are accident forms. That's it.
Hopefully you don't need this many accident forms. Hopefully you don't need any of them.
Next up is some general information. This are emergency contacts there's some numbers in here for non-emergent situations. And of course, if you have an emergency, first try to dial 911, then go to your inReach. And we'll talk about how to use the inReach a little bit later. But if you have a true emergency, your first go-to is to try 911, of course.
A great deal of Moab and trails that we'll be running have decent cell service throughout the day. So definitely don't discount going to your cell phone first, or maybe delegate one person try that while you queue up the inReach and start sending a message. See, we've got a question from Wheeling Gals. Go for it. What's your question?
Fire away.
Yeah. Let me see can I see the waivers forms, Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, you bet.
Go ahead. One thing and maybe you touched on, I didn't hear you, but on those waivers, there are going to be duties on what that person is what their duty is as they sign that. And to be clear, those are like leader or tail gunner or driver or passenger. Don't get cute and write a lot of goofy things on there about you're the comedian or what you are. Please just write down that you're a driver or a leader or a tail gunner, etc. The question is, I live in Moab and I'm a handful of part of it. I'll wait for part 2 of your question.
Yeah. So we'll keep jamming through this. So in this packet, if you get a little nervous when you're getting ready to do your trail speech and you need a quick checklist of what you should talk about, you've got that in your trail leader packet.
I see your question, Will and Gals, and as soon as Jackson's done on this one, I will answer that absolutely.
And then another important thing in your packet are our BLM, state trust land, and National Park Service permits. So occasionally you'll run into a ranger out there and they'll ask you, hey, can I see your permit? So in your trail leader packet, you'll have all of the permits that we have for our event. And if you just hand them that, they'll know how to read it. And that'll be good. We also have an insurance certificate in there, and I'll show you what that looks like. So occasionally the ranger will say, okay, cool, you have a permit. Can I see your insurance information? And if there is some kind of accident, you can always make a copy of this or take a photo of this for your records, but all the trail leader packets will also have our insurance information in it.
Yeah. So Will and Gals, I see your question there. That's a great question. And it is, because this happens and comes up all the time, that you're leading a trail and you've already seen people asking if they can squeeze in or just tag along. And the answer is unfortunately no. Cruise Moab is a closed private event for registered attendees only. That's both for liability reasons because of our insurance, but also for the experience of our group and because to satisfy the permit requirements. Many of these trails were only allowed to have X amount of vehicles and or people per trail, and we abide by that absolutely to maintain our BLM and state trust land permits. So how do you deal with that? If there's somebody that's kind of hanging out at the trailhead and not part of your group, I would invite them to go ahead and get out in front of you and just say, hey, we're going to be probably a little slower moving group than 1 or 2 of you by yourself, so you're welcome just to go on and pull ahead. And or you could tell them, hey, you're welcome to follow us if you want, but do know you'll be behind our tail gunner, and we can't really be in a position of supporting you via spotting and or other recovery. Now, we don't want to leave anybody out there. These are public trails. Everybody has the right to go use them. So I would say that's going to be a judgment call, but they can't just simply be part of the group as a non-registered, non-insured participant, because simply put, it just doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And they're not covered by any of our insurance.
Right, that's the big thing.
Yeah.
The liability is you, the trail leader. So great question, but that is a big one. Some of those other guests that could come along, maybe they're guests of your actual participants. And somebody mentioned one, Mr. Dan, is pets. Pets are allowed in and on most of the trails that we'll be doing for Cruise Moab, with the exception of those that cross into National Park Service land, NPS land. So that would be Elephant Hill. Yep. I think that's probably the only one we do on NPS. Arches as well. Yep, sorry, the Arches Trail. So pets are not allowed. So as a trail leader, that's going to be on your checklist in the morning or your mental checklist that if anybody has a pet, unless it's a service animal and they've got documentation accordingly, that's on them to provide that. But Otherwise, pets are not allowed. So don't put our group, our permit, our reputation in jeopardy by giving that a pass, because likely it will come up other users, other outfitters that are permitted or watching for those things. So be a good steward and a good steward of the event.
Absolutely. And to be like super crystal clear, even you can't even have a pet inside your vehicle in the national parks. They have to be non-existent while you're in there. So
yeah, Daniel mentioned, and Andy, I see folks understand that, hey, I can't be part of your group because this is a paid experience. It's not going to be a big confrontational thing. Don't sweat it. Don't have any drama about it. Just let your tail gunner know, hey, there's going to be some folks that may be behind you. They may stop at different times or do different things. That's okay. That's just the nature and dynamics of very popular trails throughout Moab that get a lot of users. What documentation is requested for service animals? To be fair, I don't know. So if you have a service animal, I'm going to assume you know any and all documentation that's required for you to take that anywhere that the service animals only are allowed. Maybe there's not documentation. So Tyler, to answer your question, I'm not sure there's paperwork the NPS will ask for, but I can assure you if you've got a pet just riding around in the back seat of your vehicle, jumping around and hopping out at lunch, they're going to come over and ask you to discuss that. For sure. Yeah, and the national park site would certainly have that. We could look that up for you. I've never encountered that as a scenario, so that's a good question. I'll have to look into that.
That's totally fair. All right, so any questions on what's in your leader packet or what you need to do there? If not, we'll move on down the line to our Garmin inReaches.
Yeah, I think we checked all the boxes. If you do have a question, just throw it on there. We can always bounce back. So Jackson's going to talk all about inReaches.
Also, I'll quickly throw this out. If we get through this whole spiel and you're like, dang it, I thought of a question and I need it answered, you can always email the Cruise Moab committee, or even better would be to hop on the Rising Sun forum underneath Cruise Moab and ask your question, because there's probably other folks that have that question as well.
Yeah, be a great question, a good conversation starter.
All right,
you're in.
So for emergency communications, every trail leader will receive a Garmin inReach. It looks like this. They're kind of an older version, but still work great. It is hooked up with a data plan. And the first thing I'll say is we really want you to have these on as a trail leader, to turn them on during your trail and leave them on. So don't feel like you only turn it on when you need to use it. As soon as you start your trail, check and see that this is on. How do you turn it on? Oh, geez, I don't know. Inside of your trail leader packet, I think it was Ray Romero and gang put this awesome, quick how-to guide together. So when you pick your trail leader packet up the night before and you're like, gosh, I don't know how to use this Garmin inReach thing, crack this baby open and flip through the pages, and it will walk you through how to do everything you need to do with the Cruise Moab Garmin inReach. I'll throw this out there too. If you have your own personal inReach, which a lot of folks do these days, we do prefer that you use the Cruise Moab one. It's not like a hard, steadfast rule, but we prefer that you use the Cruise Moab one, because we get tracks off of the Garmin inReach, and we have a system set up that we can see all of the inReaches all at one time on the trail. So if we get a random text, it's really easy to figure out where it came from on the trail and who's out there, who the leader is, etc.
Yeah, just see the pace of the group, know kind of where they're at through the day and how close they're getting back. There's a great question there from Douglas, and is, can a friend join me? And I assume you mean, can he join me in your vehicle? Absolutely. There's no limit on the number of passengers you can have in your vehicle outside of the legality of do they have a seatbelt. So absolutely. If you have a friend that wasn't able to sign up, registration filled up really fast this year, it's because it's such a cool event. Don't be afraid to, the best thing to bring along with you is an empty seat, and let a friend hop in with you and ride. And that's a great way to do it. But yeah, they need to be in your registered vehicle, because our permit is to the number of vehicles, and in some cases, number of people as well. There's a little bit of a cross section there.
So we do ask that if they are adults, if they're over 18, that you let us know and pay their BLM fees, because we get charged per person by the BLM. I can't remember what the fee is off the top of my head, but it adds up significantly if we start getting a bunch of folks there.
And definitely, if you want them to be able to have a meal at the raffle and the annual dinner, then certainly get an extra meal ticket for them. But that's all stuff you could sort out between now and the event. Yeah, definitely try and have that all taken care of before you get to Moab and before the event, because meals will sell out. There's only so many that the caterer can accommodate. But on the BLM trophy, I think someone from registration will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we can accommodate that in the meantime.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we usually get with the inReach, or two of them are, how does it connect to the satellite? It's got to have line of sight view to a satellite. So you have to have this in a window somewhere where it can see a satellite. I clipped mine on the little headrest post, and it seems to do okay. It's not ideal. Sometimes it'll miss some points, but that's where I usually clip mine. If you have a way to put it in your windshield, that's ideal. The second thing is when do I actually use this thing? And so for non-emergent things, like maybe your trail's just running a little late, you're on Golden Spike and there's a group in front of you, just text back to home base and let us know that you're running late. So that's one use of it. The other thing is another non-emergent situation, like, oh man, somebody slipped and maybe bummed their ankle a little bit. Hey, just letting somebody know. And then if you have what you believe is a true emergency, and it could be life-threatening or whatever, they do have an SOS button. So you can use that when you think it's appropriate. And that's one of the reasons why we have these, and that will get you in touch with emergency services. The common misconception is that if you press the SOS button, a helicopter shows up and gets you out of danger. And that is not the case. So you'll be communicating with emergency services for, lots of time before they decide how and what they're going to do to help evacuate the situation. So just keep that in mind.
Consider all your plans. Somebody asked what model. This is the inReach SE Plus, and they asked if there's videos they could watch ahead of time. Absolutely. If you were to Google inReach SE Plus, Garmin inReach SE Plus, you'll find a plethora of online tutorials, Garmin's own website, instruction manuals. They're pretty intuitive once you power them on and start playing with them, but if you're a little nervous about it first time, want to make sure you're all dialed in, absolutely hop online and learn about those. Yep, good question.
All right. Any questions about the inReach? You have anything to add for the inReach?
I don't, other than don't be afraid to use it, especially with messaging back to Cruise Moab headquarters. No one's going to be upset. The cost to send messages is so small. Send messages away. Hey, we're running late for the raffle. Our trail has a broken XYZ. Doesn't mean that we're going to start responding and getting other people out there, but just have a little bit of knowledge on pace on what's happening with the group. And maybe, particularly if it's running behind or running a little slow.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, so next up, leader preparedness.
Well, I thought this is what we were talking about earlier when what makes a good trail leader, because I think a leader that's prepared is a good trail leader.
I don't know, man. I've met some trail leaders that are like got everything and prepared for everything except for to be a nice person.
Okay. We're all guilty of that, perhaps. So leader preparedness, and I started touching on this one earlier, and a big one is a GPS track of the trail you're going to be running. Now, that's not hard and fast. If you've run Hell's Revenge a dozen times and you feel very comfortable with every turn, every twist, and every route, you don't need to be staring at your GPS. I don't like doing that personally, but it's not a bad idea to have it as a backup just so you kind of maybe know some egress or alternate points. But at a minimum, you know the trail and you're pretty comfortable with where it starts, where it finishes, where a good spot for your group to take a lunch would be, and any twist. Nothing is probably more frustrating, both as a trail leader, but for all your participants behind, is if you go down a wrong turn and now you've got to back up 15 vehicles to get to a turn you missed. So
I don't know. I've never done that before, Kurt. I don't know that.
Jackson's done a lot. We always try to hide it when he does it, but he does it.
Oh, we have a question here really quick when we break in. How are fees into national parks and state parks handled? Number one, we won't be visiting any state parks as Cruise Moab, but for national parks, when we go through the gate, we'll pay. If there's nobody at the gate, we'll pay on the way out. For arches, typically, or the last year at least, a ranger met the group and checked for park passes and for payment. So if you don't have a national park pass, you need to go the night before probably and purchase your pass for arches. Mm-hmm. And then for Elephant Hill, you'll either pay on the way out or on the way in, depending on who's there. Does that help?
Perfect. I see another one there. Tower fees. Okay. I just got on the phone. Can you start over? No. But you can go back and watch this later, Mr. Yeah. Is that Mr. Knackman?
It is Mr. Knackman.
All right, yeah, you can go back a lot later. Big one. What makes a good leader, or how is leader preparedness? Picking up your leader supplies, which would be your packet and your Garmin, the night before your trail. So you're not trying to do that the morning of. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on for the Cruise Moab committee. So preferably, and I'd say mandatory, go pick up that packet the night before and go ahead and thumb through it. Make sure you're comfortable with everything that's in there, and go ahead and take a look at your list of participants so you kind of have an idea how many and who you should be expecting. Don't need to memorize it. It's all there in print, but have that the night before so that you're at your meeting spot a half hour early or even an hour early to start checking your group in and not trying to round up that packet first thing in the morning. I'd also say that that's what makes a great trail leader on the opposite end of your trip is you turn that packet in right as you get back to the Spanish Trail Arena, the old Spanish Trail Arena, turn that back into Cruise Moab HQ, which is a nice little office in the upstairs front of the building. You won't be able to miss it, I assure you, and give that packet back with everything you had, the filled out forms, all the documents, and make sure you get that Garmin InReach turned back in because there's not enough of them to go around. They need to reboot those for the next day for the next group, send those back out.
Absolutely. And same with the rest of your kit. Yeah, the InReach and toilet and all of that stuff. Part of being prepared in the backcountry is to have a way for your guests to go number 2. Mm-hmm. And we provide that as Cruise Moab, not the number 2, the kit. And I always tell my participants on my trail, hey, you packed it in, you pack it out, but here's a toilet and a wag bag for you to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get a carry. That's the catch. You're not required to carry that out. That's on them, but we will have the supplies and the equipment. See some great questions, but is there any checklist or any discussion about needing to be a trained medical responder, like a WUFA course or a woofer or any of that? No, it's not required that you have any of that formal first aid certification to be a Cruise Moab trail leader. Because of the proximity of the trails, certainly Moab's got a really good infrastructure for medical backcountry incidents if they happen, but it's not a bad idea. Now, somebody brought up, it's a great thing to have in your driver's meeting. We're going to get to a driver's meeting, and that's certainly something I ask every time, is if anybody is part of the group that is comfortable and it has formal medical training. So we'll touch on that in a minute, but great question. I
also usually ask if somebody has some kind of condition that they come up and maybe whisper in my ear if they don't want to share it with everyone, just so if things go sideways. But so leader preparedness. So along with your bathroom kit, you'll also have a spill kit. Every now and again, we get a breakdown, we spill some gear oil on the ground or some power steering fluid or something like that, and we have a kit not only to soak up those fluids, but also a bag, etc., to pick up contaminated dirt and carry it out with you, because that stuff's got to be disposed of properly. And we surely don't want to leave it on the trail.
Right. So yeah, full kit. Other relevant information, a good trail leader kind of just knows some things about geology or maybe some history on the trail. Not every trail's got a lot of that kind of going on, because some of them were built or have always kind of been purely recreational. I keep mentioning Hell's Revenge. That'd be a good example of one that doesn't necessarily have like a mining history or like a ranching history, but many other trails, Elephant Hill be a great example of one that has a ton of really cool history dating back to Native Americans and fast forward all the way up to ranching and then modern recreation. So spend a little time, if you can, digging up some of that information, browse the forums, pose the question on the Rising Sun forum, hop on Mud and see if there's discussion about it, and see if you can just find some fun little tidbits to kind of keep conversation or share some fun facts while you're out on the trail.
I was reading here, did you say Expedition Utah?
Oh, Expedition Utah is a great one as well.
Great one as well. I carry these little things with me. So when somebody's like, hey, what kind of flower is that? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Let me get back in my truck and think about it. And then I flip through this and I go, oh, that's Indian paintbrush. Hey, I think that flower was Indian paintbrush. So these are kind of cool. You can pick them up at like Barnes & Noble or probably Amazon.
Yeah, certainly Moab bookstores. Another great one that's both for trail, like the actual routing, but also some really good information about like history, is going to be like one of the Wells books. There's a handful of others that cover the Moab trails. Some of this is a little dated. Maybe the format for some is dated. They like all digital. I love paper for redundancy, and this will have GPS points you can go in and put into a GPS software, HEMA, Gaia, etc., and have a little better turn by turn. So if you can't find a downloadable GPS track, this is still a great option. And then one nice thing is this, many times for many trails, is going to identify kind of alternate routes, maybe shortcuts that are legal, and egress points. Say you need to get your group out, it's running too long, maybe there is an incident, a trail break, some damage. What's a good way to get them off the trail a little quicker than continuing with the whole group? We'll talk a little bit about that as a tail gunner duty. How about meeting location and times? I think we hammered on that one pretty good, but anything to say on that one?
No. Comms, channels, frequencies. Make sure that your Your radio works, of course. The battery's charged as a trail leader before you get there. We've gone mostly to FRS, although I still have a ham in mind. Usually a lot of us have hams, and I like to be able to hit my gunner from way far back there. Sometimes I struggle a little bit with the FRS radios, but make sure that they can handle a full day on the trail. Most of the little handheld ones with just their own battery struggle to do that on high power. So if like the one that Kurt just held up, if that's your only way of communication as a trail leader, carry 2 of those, or some kind of battery or a way to charge it.
Yep. Let's talk about radios for a minute, because it's the perfect timing. It's going to be one of the key items to success of a good trail ride, is being able to communicate with everybody. You can't force them to have a radio, or force them to listen to or talk on it or provide any communication, but the ability for you to keep a track of kind of where the pace of the group is, share some of that relevant information, but also hear about if there is an issue back before you get a mile ahead of everybody, if everyone's stuck back in an obstacle far back behind you. The question came up is, do trail leaders usually use an alternate frequency or an alternate channel? I would say frequency, yes, in my case at least. The trail leaders, and we'll even do a mid-gunner on the swell because it's such a long trail. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't need to be a formal position, but just ask somebody in the middle to maybe help relay communications. But we will use ham for some of the bigger conversations, such as just how pace is going. But Cruise Moab has adopted the FRS, these nice little radios. They're available in many different formats, and you can buy these as vehicle-mounted solutions as well. So you don't have to have a ham radio. Ham radios require licenses. We'd ask that if you are operating on a ham, you have one. But formally, we'll be using the FRS. Trail leaders, and with your gunner, you may choose to use a ham radio, but not required. That makes sense? That answer all those questions? There's a few of them about that.
Yeah, so I was just there was a couple of questions here. So about Elephant Hill, looks like, oh yeah, Andy got that one taken care of. So it is tight, and you'll have to spot the 200 through, most likely. It depends a little bit on how the sand is sitting down there.
We brought a few of them through the last few years. Yeah, 200, yeah, no problem.
No sweat there. So tech inspection, and if a vehicle is appropriate for the trail that they've shown up to. So tech inspection will determine the level of vehicle, essentially. You'll get a green sticker, a yellow sticker, etc. It's up to the participant to make sure that they're not signed up for a trail that's too difficult for their vehicle. And then it's the trail leader should be able to look at the rigs that he has on his trail and say, okay, this trail requires a green sticker. Does everyone here have a green sticker? And I'll say along with that is, if somebody's rig shows up and it's day 3 and it's pouring power steering fluid all over the place, or leaking, or making weird noises or whatever, as a trail leader, you're kind of the end of the line to say, hey, why don't you hop in a passenger seat today, or maybe go work on the truck or something like that. I don't think it's appropriate for you to bring a truck that's leaking that badly onto the trail.
Nope. And your packet, Matt pointed this out, that roster, as I mentioned, has the year of their vehicle, the type of vehicle they're going to be. It also has tire size and differential conditions, such as open or locked. So you're going to have a pretty good vibe. If you thumb through that the night before and see somebody snuck on there with 31s and open diffs, and they're supposed to be running Moab Rim or Pritchett or one of the more technical trails, certainly bring that to the Cruise Moab's attention, and make sure you address that the following morning. As the trail leader, that is kind of a responsibility, but I'd say a power you have is to tell people, hey, this isn't going to be appropriate on the trail. You're going to not make it. You're going to break it. You're going to hold up the rest of the group. It's not right for you to be out there. So you can make that call. Preferably do it in a nice, like Jackson's way. Invite him to hop in with you.
Absolutely. Let's see. We got a question here. Oh, any mechanics at the event? Oh yeah, lots of them.
Plenty of them.
And their ability to work on your truck depends on what your whiskey and beer selection looks like. So
there's not a formal mechanic, to be clear. It's nobody's job at the event to provide mechanical services. But if you're wrenching and need a hand, this is a great community event. You'll find no shortage, and maybe sometimes too many hands willing to help. So I think that's never proven to be a big issue. But there's not like a formal mechanic. This isn't drop your truck off at XYZ and they'll have it running for you the next morning type event. Bring all the spares you need, all the appropriate parts, and bring a credit card, because there are great parts stores or options in town, but you're going to have to sometimes expedite those parts to get them there.
Yep, I totally agree. All right, so
yeah, Matt mentions, don't show up with a truck that's iffy. Fix your junk at home. 100%. Show up with your truck in the best running condition and it's ready to rock and roll. Don't put off any maintenance till you're in the parking lot the night before. Don't put off any fixes till the morning of. Just do your best to have it dialed in and make sure it's ready to go and you can have a great day out on the trail.
Absolutely. And for the most part, it would be a real sad day to see a vehicle get turned away at tech inspection that drove there from,
Our frequencies and frequencies are channels identified on the registration packet? I think no, right? We just say that they can. They are, but they're not on the packet. They're on the Cruise Moab has it on the website. There's a whole list.
Yeah, and they're in the trail leader packet.
And in the trail leader packet. Yeah, they're not on the cover of it, but there will be. Yeah, somebody asked that. There will be. That'll be set. Frequency you would choose between ham radio operators. It's not a bad thing to have redundancy, but that won't be set.
Absolutely.
Itinerary and lineup. You want to talk through?
Yeah. So without getting too much into the driver's meeting portion of this, it's important as a trail leader for you to understand your timing as you go through the trail. So if I'm on Poison Spider and I haven't gotten to lunch yet and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, oh no, it's going to be a long day. So take some time as a trail leader and plan out where you should be at given points in time and share that with your group. Because if you have somebody that loves taking pictures like I do, and they're it's starting to get behind, you can say, hey, when we talked about this, we were supposed to be here at 1 o'clock. We're running about 15 minutes behind. So if y'all would follow me, let's jam on down the trail, and then we've got a beautiful lunch spot that we'll get to, and we'll be able to take all the pictures we need there, and whatever, put on your sunshine and talk them out of holding the group up. Mm-hmm. But putting an itinerary together and sharing it in your driver's meeting, and then referring back to it as you drive down the trail is kind of like a handshake agreement with your participants. Hey, we're going to try and do this at these times, etc. So itinerary and then lineup. You want to hit lineup?
Yeah, lineup, and I'm going to say even right in between those is a quick driver's meeting. It's a great thing to get everybody circled up. It may not be appropriate to do at your original meeting spot. Maybe that's once you get to the trailhead, do your air down, and then do a quick driver's meeting just before you depart for the trail. Just to reiterate on some of those items, like what radio channel we're going to be using on the FRS. I'd like to do a brief route sketch. Hey, you're here for this trail today. This is what we're going to be doing. This is kind of where we plan to take lunch roughly. Jackson just kind of hammered on that. But then introduce yourself as the trail leader and introduce your tail gunner as well. Let everybody know kind of who you are, what vehicle you'll be driving, where to find you. Should be pretty straightforward. And then, just be really clear with those expectations and kind of what the day is going to be like. And when you hope to get off the trail, everybody understands that sometimes things run late, or if a vehicle breaks or there's an incident, it's going to be delayed. But that way they're not kind of stressed out about when they're going to be back. And I really like to, during that driver's meeting, I have it's my slinky method. It's not mine. I certainly picked it up from somebody along the way, but just impress upon everybody that hopefully they get to know 2 people throughout the day. And that's the vehicle in front of them and the vehicle behind them. They don't need to get to know, it'd be great if they got to know everybody in the entire Cruise Moab group, but realistically, they're only going to meet so many people. But I would like them to know what vehicles in front of them throughout the trail ride during the day and what vehicles behind them. And that way, if they're get to an intersection, haven't seen anybody, they can say, hey, this is John in the white 80. I haven't seen the blue FJ60 behind me yet. And then we can kind of start working our way through and make sure nobody's lost. And part of that is the slinky rule, is that when you get to an intersection, we don't all need to be balled up car after car after car. And the swell run, for those that have done it, and I'd say Elephant Hill's the same way, there's going to be long stretches where it's totally appropriate to be a quarter mile apart to let dust settle or to be able to kind of soak in the views yourself. But it's very important that at every intersection, you kind of do a stop and wait. You stop, wait till the person behind you sees you ahead and you see them in your rear mirror, and then you go ahead and progress. And it's that slinky method. And that way, the trail leader kind of knows too, if he hasn't seen anybody in his or her rearview mirror, they know to slow down and kind of slow the pace down. Yeah. And of course, all this is combined with communication through your group and your tail gunner at the back. So it's just a really good way to not have to be everybody right on each other's bumpers. That's not the point. Nobody likes that kind of trail ride. At least I don't.
Yeah. And it's like, if anybody's ever done an Elephant Hill with me, it's very common for you to say, hey, we're not leaving you behind. We're just making room for you. Mm-hmm. And on a trail like that, the obstacles stack vehicles up, and there's not really any wrong turns you can make, except for a couple where we wait for everybody. But that's where, as a trail leader, I sometimes rely a lot on my gunner to say, hey, on Elephant Hill, we have 10 trucks. I'm going to be in charge of spotting the first 5. You are in charge of spotting or managing the back 5. That way we can keep everyone moving through the trail all the time, and we're not, waiting for 15, 20 minutes for vehicles to clear obstacles.
Yep. So that driver's meeting is an important part, and offer the opportunity, if time allows, for all your participants to give a quick intro on who they are, where they're from, and maybe who's traveling with them. Just promote some of that camaraderie and let everyone get to know each other. But that's also a last minute great option to ask everybody, do you have a radio? Is your tank full of fuel? And is your vehicle ready to go? Do you have everything you need for the day? You brought food, you brought water. Make sure that you address those problems before you find out at the trailhead down the road or halfway through the trail that somebody forgot to fill up their tank. It happens, but it's a lot easier to solve in the parking lot there than it is later on. And likewise on the radios, maybe somebody's radio's dead. Usually as a trail leader, it's a great idea to have a couple spares. They're inexpensive enough. And if you don't, likely somebody in your group does.
Would be a good idea for a forum. Okay, gotcha. Suggestion, that's awesome.
Yeah, somebody asked on fuel. There's not many trails that you'll need any additional fuel. Elephant Hill would be kind of borderline whether you do. The San Rafael Swell certainly can. Some people will if you've got smaller tanks or less efficient vehicles, less efficient Land Cruisers. But any of the normal Moab trails, the day runs, you're going to pass 5 gas stations on the way to the trail meeting spot, and you're going to pass 5 on the way back to Old Spanish Trail Arena. So there should be no excuse for not having fuel in your tank.
Yep. Maybe throw Cocopelli on there too. Maybe
Cocopelli could absolutely use fuel as well. Yep.
All right. So I think we hammered on leader preparedness pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I have one last note here, in that as a trail leader, your vehicle should be in very serviceable condition. As a trail leader, you shouldn't be worried about your own vehicle breaking down on the trail.
That'll make things stressful. One more though we didn't cover, trail leader, restrooms, and that's a good thing to talk about in the driver's meeting. If you are fortunate that you have one of those trails that may have like vault toilets or public restrooms at a meeting in a middle spot or the air up spot for like Finn's and Hell's Revenge, identify that in the morning and identify that throughout the day if there's going to be an option, and then remind people that you do have the means and mode to set up for them to set up a portable backcountry porta potty, because it does need to be used in those environments. Identify that early on about how that's going to work so that nobody is awkwardly trying to ask you that over the radio and having a miserable time because they don't know.
Yeah, like like say on Dome Plateau, Dome Plateau is a long drive out of town, everybody's got a bunch of coffee in them. So I usually try to peel off on one of the little vault toilets really quick and give everybody a quick little bathroom break before we mosey down the trail.
Mm-hmm. Good, yep.
But all right, so let's move on to some trail etiquette. We're going to talk a little bit about not blocking the trail for other users and airing down, etc. So I'll jump right in with trailhead and air down, air up areas. So for 99% of folks that go out, airing down is going to be like a 7 to 10 minute process. And as a trail leader, you may have to try and offer some suggestions or help somebody air down if it's their first time. If it's appropriate for you to do that, if you feel good about doing that. The air down spot should be in an area that's not blocking the trail for other users. And as a trail leader, when you do your pre-run, this is something I mark on my GPS and say, oh, that's a great air down spot. For instance, I'm going to use Dome Plateau again. Pulling into the campground and making a bunch of noise early in the morning is not a good spot for an air down spot. Real quick bathroom break, totally fine. On Dome Plateau, if you go up the trail a couple hundred yards, there's a great pull-off spot to do all the airing down. So as a trail leader, when you're doing your pre-run, try to find those spots that make sense to air down.
Cool. I'm going to back up on trail leader stuff and your morning driver's meeting, because there's 2 important ones I think we didn't touch on adequately. I know we mentioned medical personnel. That's a great time during your little driver's meeting to ask if anybody has formal medical training. And you can even ask them, hey, you don't need to raise your hand. Come mention it to me after, just so if there is an incident, you know who in your group may be willing to be part of that scenario. Number 2 is that we missed. It's a big one. I know it's lower down on our list, so we're going to really hammer on it, but it's an important one to mention during your driver's meeting is tread lightly. A lot of these areas that we're going to be traveling in are very contested. Not everybody appreciates motorized users being out on public lands, unfortunately. And so it's very important that you start the day with a quick discussion about tread lightly, and make sure that everybody is up to speed on that before the first tires hit dirt, that they understand that they're going to be driving, parking, stopping. Everything is going to happen on legal motorized routes. They're not going to pull off and just park wherever they want. And I know we're going to talk about it a little lower, but I think that's an important thing to hammer on in the driver's meeting, because that is such an important spot.
And we'll go through kind of like the steps that like kind of we use in the driver's meeting here, like really thoroughly through the steps in a second.
Okay.
All right, so back to trail etiquette. So convoy rules, you talked about this a little bit.
Slinky
before.
method, yeah.
The slinky method. So you should always be able to see someone in your rearview mirror, with a couple of exceptions. Obviously, if there's no way to make a wrong turn and you're trying to make sure the group's moving, it can be acceptable. But general rule of thumb, you should always have someone in your rearview mirror, and you should always watch the person behind you make a turn. As long as you stick to those rules, the pack will stick together and no one will get lost.
Yeah, nothing's more frustrating than when the group gets split in half and you say, well, who was behind? The last participant shows up of the front group, and you say, well, who was behind you? And they say, well, I think it was like the white 80, I think. And you don't know who they are, where they are, or when they were last seen. So it's everybody's job in your trail ride to kind of help keep that system moving.
Absolutely.
I think we've nailed communication pretty good, unless there's any questions that pop up in here. If you have a communication question to ask, but I think we've done pretty well.
I was going to throw out one more quick tip on convoy rules, which is if you have someone in your group that is, say, mid-pack or in the back that is really slowing down one section of the group, it can be really helpful to take that person and put them behind you as a trail leader. One, that'll help them understand maybe a line a little bit better here or there, but it'll also give them an idea that it's not the person in front of them necessarily that's causing this lack of pace. Putting them behind you will help give them a little bit more confidence, help keep the pack moving a little more.
And that way you'll kind of understand what the pace of the group is doing, how it's looking. Yep, good point. Keeping a trail clear. I know we've kind of talked about that one a little bit overall, but definitely a big item, particularly on those busier trails in Moab. You've got a big group, up to 15, even maybe up to 20 vehicles, depending on the trail that you're trying to move through, and be very polite with other trail users, because they're obviously just out there to do the same thing you are, and that's have a great day. If ever you can, we like to let them, we call it like play through. If your tail gunner says, hey, we've got a faster group of vehicles moving through, maybe they're a small group, 2 or 3, try and find appropriate ways to let them play through your group and get out ahead where it's environmentally and ethically responsible. We don't want them having to drive clear off of the trail or off the trail at all to get by you. But if one by one you can find wider legal spots of the trail to let them slip through, just mention that to them. Hey, I'm here with a group of 15. You're going to be moving faster than us, so we're going to let you play through our group as fast as we can. And that's the same for groups that are oncoming as well. Just let them know. We like to use the hand signals in Utah. But as a trail leader, I think it's even better to stop that first one in your group and to say, hey, I've got 10 trucks behind me. You're a group of 2. Do you mind pulling over right here and letting us pass you? Many times they're going to say, yeah, that doesn't sound fun to pass a whole group of 10. Right. Let's let you guys by. So just work it out with other users on the trail, but don't block the trail. Again, we don't have exclusive use to these, and nobody likes that. That will frustrate everybody. And that's not just while you're moving on the trail, that's certainly at obstacles. So what's your rule for obstacles, Mr. Philby?
Yeah, I was going to throw something in there too, and that as a trail gunner, letting your trail leader know if there's somebody behind you that wants to play through is important. As a trail leader, when you receive that information, don't feel like you need to completely stop your whole trail run to let somebody through, especially if it's like a dirt bike or side-by-side. A lot of times you need to let people figure out where's an appropriate place to pull over for them. So keep your run moving and let them pick their way through as appropriate.
Yep. Have everyone in your group to say, hey, when the motorcycle's behind you and you get to a good spot, wave them by you, but keep everybody moving. Yeah, don't stop the whole group.
So obstacles. There's 3 main things I think in my brain of obstacles. One is, as a trail leader, pull all the way forward. Make sure that there's enough room between you and the obstacle to get the trucks that are coming up the obstacle behind you. Otherwise, it becomes a fiasco running back and forth, right?
And it's always further than you think it's going to be in your head. Like you kind of do the math on, okay, every vehicle's 20 feet. If I pull ahead a couple hundred feet, that's enough room. It's not. It never is. Pull as far back as you can and then kind of work your way back to the obstacle to kind of start helping spot the rest of the group.
So the other thing, and this is maybe my personal preference, there's different views on this, is I ask somebody if they want a spot. I always say, hey, if you want a spot, give me a thumbs up out the window or flash your headlights at me. In which case, I'll give them a spot. I always ask them if they prefer to have me spot or someone in their car and give them time to let their passenger get out to spot them. And that's totally fine if somebody doesn't want to use you as a trail leader, as a spotter. I totally respect that. That being said, if somebody decides they don't want a spot, and they're trying to get up the obstacle. I follow the 3 strikes, you're out rule. And these are all points that we discussed early on in our driver's meeting, of course. Handshake deal, right? After 3 strikes, it's okay, either you're going to take a spot or a strap or something like that, because we got to keep everything moving.
Yeah, if everybody wanted to spend a half hour trying to make it up an obstacle, it just doesn't work when you do the math of the day. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule on 3 strikes. That's kind of the maximum if it's a long day, big group. But if you've got time at some of those obstacles and you're running ahead at good on pace because you've run the trail, you kind of understand where you need to be, and you've got extra time and a couple in your group want to try some hard lines, absolutely, let them. That's not a problem at all. Like, the goal is here to be flexible and have fun. And yeah, just to back up on Jackson's point, as the trail leader, you're not required to be everybody's spotter. We would hope you would be willing to if somebody asks you and needs you to be, but certainly don't insert yourself into everybody's obstacle. If they've got their own spotter, there only needs to be one of them. And if they've delegated somebody else, that's awesome. You're the trail leader. You can just get back to leading the trail and let them spot.
Yep. So Dan, I just saw in the comments, hit my number 3, which is always leave plenty of space between vehicles. And this is also another thing that you discussed in your trail leader or your trail meeting. But there's no reason to have people stacked up right behind each other on the actual obstacle. So I'll use Hell's Gate as an example.
We've seen what happens.
We've seen what happens when you do that. So Hell's Gate specifically, don't make the turn to go up Hell's Gate until the car in front of you has completely cleared the obstacle. Likewise, don't start coming down the entrance to Hell's Gate before everyone else has gotten out of the way.
Yeah, and you may ask, how do I know if they've cleared the obstacle? Radio. That's a great thing to be discussing. Hey, XYZ vehicle behind me, I've cleared the obstacle or I've cleared the hill. Perhaps you can't see them. You're clear to proceed. Leave them an out. Nothing's more frustrating than being on an obstacle and needing to back out and get re-lined up or take another shot at it, or just have a safety out. You've got to jam it in reverse and get off of a hill because you're getting tippy and there's too many vehicles piled up behind you. So leave plenty of room that they've got a nice safe out if they've got to back up, and then use the radio to ask them if they're clear and they're up the obstacle if you can't visually see it.
Cool. So trail etiquette and safety, we've hammered most of it.
Alternate radio channel, we talked about that. If there's questions asked, nobody gets left behind. I think we talked about that adequately with the slinky. Bathroom breaks, not a bad idea to pre-plan some of those in too.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, some of the group's going to get broken out and separated. But yeah, maybe plan those. So every hour, ask on the radio, hey, is everybody doing good? Anyone need a good photo spot or something? Preferably you're not setting up the bathroom in the good photo spot, but use your best judgment. Here's a big one that we didn't talk about yet, and we need to, and that's no booze. All Cruise Moab trail rides.
Or substances in general that alter your
right.
whatever.
Yeah. Booze is a general term for anything that inhibits your ability to safely operate a vehicle. So trail leaders, not an issue. You have to really keep an eye on that. This is a great crowd and a great group that comes out to Cruise Moab every year, but maybe emphasize that in the trail meeting, that even at lunch or even at the end of the trail, it's still not appropriate until everyone's back at camp, and then they're all adults and they can do whatever they want. But on the trail ride, throughout the day, even at lunch, it's not appropriate. It's not part of our policy, our rules for Cruise Moab, that you should be doing any drinking on the trail. So just don't do it.
Absolutely. Don't get in over your head. So even as trail leaders, we run out of talent. And don't be afraid, man. If you've ran Poison Spider 17 times and for some reason you can't get up the Z-turn or whatever, the dentist office or whatever it's called, by all means, like, you can ask somebody for a spot. It's not illegal, make sure you get through and stay patient. And if you run out of talent, don't let it freak you out. Just ask for help.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll even choose a little softer lines than maybe I otherwise would if I'm having fun. And I'm saying this as I'm trail leading, just take an easier route, get up ahead, get parked for the obstacle, and come back and help the group work their way through that. I have as much fun watching somebody else work their way up really cool or hard obstacles I do driving it myself. So I just assume kind of get around it. And sometimes that maybe even means taking a bypass. I've driven the obstacle before. I don't need to do it that day and be one more person holding up the group, or worst case, break something. The question always comes up, who goes which direction for the restrooms? Neil, I wish we could have you here telling this joke. And that's Men to the left, women to the right, and that's because women are always right. It's true, they are. So that's a fun way to segue who goes which direction to scamper off into the weeds. But it had to be said because we've got about 5 different people mentioning that joke.
It is, and along those lines, it's not appropriate to have your participants stomp across a bunch of cryptobiotic crusts, which we're going to talk about in a second, to go to the bathroom. So make sure they, in your driver's meeting, they understand where an appropriate spot to go to the bathroom is and where it's not.
And where is not, yeah, not appropriate.
And then the last one is drink water, 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 because passed out, dehydrated trail guide is no guide at all.
Right, and help promote that within your group. Ask everybody to stay hydrated. Not a bad thing for you to have plenty of spare bottles of water or jugs of water or some kind of vessel to contain that. You may find other people out on the trail, other users, and sometimes that's the best way to make quick friends with another user group that maybe has to wait as your big group works through, is offer them some cold water. If they're mountain bikers or they're on dirt bikes and don't have easy way to carry water, that's like that gesture goes a long ways, and they'll say, cool, yeah, I'll hang out and watch you guys if I get to drink some cold water. So sunscreen, just any other human needs, make sure you've got enough for yourself so you're not the weak link that's going down hard on a hot day. And you're going to be running and moving and having fun. And so, yeah, stay hydrated.
Any questions on that topic, like leader preparedness?
Neil says, have Gatorade and electrolytes. Yeah, great idea. Whatever your, you know your body better than any of us. Choose whatever means make it. It's not going to be Red Bulls all day to stay amped up. Drink some water out there.
All right. So we are in the presence of a master tread trainer.
So put me on the spot.
I'm going to let you start this one off.
All right, this is a not delicate subject. Moab is under a lot of pressure, and Moab's being loved to death. That's the reason we're heading there, because we love it too. But you have to keep in mind that not every user appreciates the way that we use trails with our motorized vehicles. In fact, there are many users that would appreciate it more if every one of those routes was closed to anything but perhaps humans powered and maybe not even mechanized activities. So some would love to see it closed to everything but maybe foot traffic. And because of that, there is a lot of pressure on these trails, and there's going to be people out there possibly that don't like your group, and they're going to be watching. But even if they're not watching, the ethical outdoorsman in you should be doing everything you can to be legal throughout the day, and not just legal, but kind of ethical in your use. So looking at good spots to take a restroom facility or set up the porta potty, or what is that we're calling it? The porta potty. It's not really a porta potty.
Porta john.
It's a porta john. It's a portable seat toilet, basically. A portable toilet seat is what the setup is. I don't want to make it sound too extravagant. You're not packing a porta potty with it. But yeah, there is a lot of pressure. So be a good steward of the land. A big part of that is going to be those tread lightly principles. We can run through those. The big one in the Moab area, and many hot buttons, but cryptobiotic soil. And I wish we had we should have a little video or a picture of it, but you could Google cryptobiotic soil, get a little bit of a vibe of what that looks like. And that's found all over the greater Moab area. And it is a hot button issue because it is a real issue. That is a living organism that holds that soil together, that prevents erosion both from wind and water. So it's a pretty important substance. And when you bust the crust by walking through it and or driving through it, you really promote erosion, and that suddenly turns into instant evidence perhaps for those that want trails closed. Plus it's just not the right thing to be doing. So it's important to maintain, stay on the road, stay on the trails at all times, use only existing routes and legal routes in those areas. Yeah. That cover everything you want me to say?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, that could be an hour and a half class in its own.
Yeah. If you're on a run with me, I always give something away for anyone that can name the tread principles.
Oh, that's a good one.
So yeah, you can hold me to that. The last thing I was going to throw out there is you're going to need to explain this to the folks that are on your trail run, the importance of it. Not just don't do it, but the actual importance of it. Somebody once told me it's like the coral of the desert. So the coral dies, the ocean dies, right? The cryptobiotic soil dies, the desert dies.
It's a good way. That's a good way to look at it. And Jackson's right. It's a good thing to bring up with your group. Emphasize that message throughout the day. Perhaps if you see an educational opportunity from somebody that like maybe walked where they shouldn't have, you don't need to call them out for the entire group. Maybe that's pull them aside and make a little mention to them. Like, hey, that's not a great spot to walk because this is cryptobiotic soil. It's important that it stays in there. Let's go through those tread principles though, because I think all of them do hammer down on something really cool. And I would encourage everybody, particularly trail leaders, you can go to the treadlightly.org website and you can do like their tread awareness course. Just takes like less than an hour, but it gives you some really good background on kind of the whole idea of tread lightly, and as a bigger picture, a whole idea of how we as users can kind of maybe restore our image, or at least maintain our image as stewards of the land. And you're going to run into folks from time to time, maybe not on Cruise Moab, maybe it's in your own backyards, that don't like motorized users. But I think with some of the tread lightly principles and dialogue, at least you can have a respectful conversation about how you use the outdoors and how they use the outdoors.
Absolutely. Were you going to run through the tread?
I know them. You build me up. You got to run through them now.
All right. So tread is an acronym. Is that right? Is that the right thing? It's an acronym, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of.
Each letter stands for something else.
Yeah. So the T is travel responsibly. Travel responsibly. Again, all kind of, we've heard enough. We understand that sort of, right?
Mm-hmm. And let's go back and forth. R is the respect the rights of others, and that's a big one. We mentioned that everyone else has the rights to be using these trails. You can't just assume that because we're Cruise Moab and we're permitted, hey, you can't use this trail, or you can't pass us, or we're the only, hey, this was our planned lunch spot, you need to move. It's not how it works. You got to be a team player out there.
I would say, like when we're on national forest, some folks that go behind me aren't into firearms, but in a lot of spots it's perfectly legal to shoot.
Let's talk about firearms just as a real quick little off in the weeds tangent. You don't really need any of them for your trail light as a trail leader. We're not asking you to provide any level of security in that regard. It's not illegal to have them in your vehicle at all in the state of Utah. It's perfectly acceptable and ethical and legal, but I would just caution that we don't do target shooting or long range shooting or practice shooting as part of Cruise Moab events. So there should be really no situation that those ever come out, because just understand, and you likely do as a gun owner, that not everybody else likes seeing those and maybe isn't as comfortable as you and I are around them. So they ought to stay in your vehicle unless there's very extenuating circumstances.
Absolutely. So anyways,
I can't think of one of those extenuating circumstances right now. But
yeah. So part of the respect the rights of others is you may not like firearms, but sometimes it's legal to shoot, and you have to deal with it because you're respecting the rights of someone else on the trail doing what is perfectly legal. All right. So
E, educate yourself. This is a massive one. And all the things you're doing tonight, and give yourself a pat on the back for being in part of this class. Not saying you're learning anything amazing, but I hope you take a few tidbits away. But educating yourself both about the ethical uses of land and the legal routes that exist in the Moab area, that's part of educating yourself.
Absolutely. So the A is avoid sensitive areas. And we talked about cryptobiotic soil. That totally qualifies as a sensitive area. So avoid driving, stepping, whatever, letting your dog run onto cryptobiotic soil.
Mm-hmm. And D is do your part, and all of the things we've been talking about throughout the night, really hammer down on the do your part. We're going to pick up trash as we're out on the trail. We're going to leave it better than we found it. Neil mentioned a really fun idea, and that is that you ask everybody you make it a contest. Find a fun little prize. Doesn't have to be anything amazing. Choose something fun at the gas station the night before, but do a trash pickup prize. Whoever finds the most litter out on the trails gets a little prize, and you do that at the end of your trail ride and kind of make it a fun little formal ceremony. Maybe you do it just for kids, but you could do it for kids and adults. But everybody should be packing their own trash out, and then some, anything they find.
Absolutely. That kind of wraps up our portion of Tread Lightly. If there's any questions, please throw them in the comments. Mm-hmm. So the next step is like a quick little blurb on spotting. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but and I actually saw it in the comments here a second ago when we were talking about spotting, which is there's only one spotter at a time.
Everybody else
zip it. But there are cases where someone might see something that you can't see, in which case you communicate to the spotter, not to the person in the vehicle. And that is in my realms as a trail leader is perfectly acceptable.
The spotter may delegate a couple other spotters to, hey, you keep an eye on that side. Let me know if you see something. But yeah, make it easy on the driver that only be very clear one person's going to be speaking to them and giving directions. So shouldn't need to hammer on too much more on spotting.
Absolutely.
I know we've talked a lot. A safety word is stop. Everybody should be comfortable saying that. And I will say it's everybody's job to be a spotter when it comes to saying stop. If they see something dangerous or something that's not right, anybody can yell that and be very proud about that. But when it comes to giving directions and true spotting, one person.
Absolutely. Let's see other notes we had on here.
Recovery.
Yeah. Cool. It is not your job to be Matt's off-road at Cruise Moab.
Yeah. Or Rory Irish, who's more Moab relevant.
Absolutely. So, but occasionally you will have to make the decision on recovering somebody, attaching a strap to somebody or something like that. If you're not comfortable doing it as a trail leader, that is okay. The person driving the vehicle can make the decision, as well as it's okay to poll your participants and see if someone has more experience than you do or is more comfortable with it. That's part of the don't get in over your head. Mm-hmm. As a trail leader, you're not expected to be like Superman out there, right? Like, it's okay to say, this is weird, I'm not comfortable with this, and then get everybody together and say, does anyone have more experience with this than me?
Get some eyes on it. A lot of ways to look at a recovery as it pertains to Cruise Moab. One is, can we do something about it right now? Can we fix it or recover it and carry on with our normal trail ride? That's obviously going to be the best case scenario. If it's something that's going to be maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour on the outside. I would just say if it's going to be something that's going to take more than an hour to solve, likely it's going to be a best solution to get the bulk of your trail ride moving, and maybe then designate your tail gunner to stay with that recovery or one or two recovery vehicles to solve that problem. Another option is, can we lock this vehicle up, secure it, find seat belts and seats for those in that vehicle, and let's get back to town, and there we'll find the solution we need if it's going to be bigger spare parts. If somebody catastrophically breaks something and the vehicle's not flat towable or easily movable, well, then trying to solve that with your entire trail group is going to be a fool's errand, and you're just going to delay things. It's going to be best just to kind of wrap it up and say, hey, let's lock the vehicle down, park it in a good safe spot, and we'll come back for it later that night. Cruise Moab does have a recovery team working that is kind of set up to help solve those problems. It's not immediate. They're not going to be there within 30 minutes. These are volunteers that need to spool up and come up with a solution, but there is a process in play to solve that. So don't be afraid that we're not going to leave anybody's vehicle out there forever, but it's maybe need to stay out overnight till a proper plan can be
absolutely formed. And Kurt touched on a little bit, which is nobody gets left behind, but really nobody gets left alone is kind of the thing.
Right. Yeah.
So if somebody says, hey, I think I can limp this truck off the trail, cool, send your gunner with them, do something like that. Don't let them just wander off alone.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good point. Other items on recovery, gloves if you're helping. Like to see anybody that's got hands on the vehicle, moving rocks, moving the max tracks around, certainly using any equipment such as a powered winch, hand winch, high lift, gloves on, personal protection. Make sure, probably ought to have some good sturdy boots or shoes. And as a trail leader, that's maybe something you could be keeping an eye on if you're not comfortable being part of the recovery, is be taking a good look at the safety of it.
And it's never a bad thing to hop on your inReach and call in backup if you need it. So if you're in a situation that's sticky with the recovery, start communicating back to Cruise Moab headquarters so that they can be prepared to spool the team up if they need to.
Yep. Safety. I mean, it's critical that everybody gets back safely. Vehicles we're a little less worried about. We'll get them back, maybe not safely. We try to. Everybody should try to.
All right. Obviously, there's no recovery class going on here, but if you have some sort of specific question, we can definitely try and help you out. Mm-hmm. Moving on. So here's the big gist that we're going to like ping through in order is the driver's meeting.
I know we've hammered on a lot of it, but we'll just run through quickly those introductions: trail leader, gunner, a waist gunner. If you're not familiar with those are, the trail leader, I hope you know by now because you're in the seminar to learn about it. The tail gunner is going to be that person serving at the back, and those are pre-designated ahead of time. Now, a waist gunner is not. And that's something that as a trail leader, the two gunners, or the trail leader and the tail gunner, can decide, hey, let's have somebody in the middle. I mentioned it early on. If nothing else, it's great for communication, that they pass messages along to the back if the group starts getting spread out. But it's also a great thing if the group does get broken up into a couple groups just because of the pace, that they kind of understand they're kind of help pass along that information and move the group along.
Yeah, that's a great point on waist gunner.
So identify those, introduce those, and then have the participants introduce. I know we talked about that one earlier, so I think some of this is review, which is great review. Looking over the vehicles, making sure you're okay with the lineup. That's great. That's a great thing to do as you're doing the waivers. Kind of mentioned, give every vehicle an eye. If it's like purging a lot of fluid or it's got a flat tire, or make that call before you get to the trail.
Absolutely. And this is maybe a style thing, I guess. Not everybody likes to do it this way. But obviously we have all these kind of ground rules with Cruise Moab, like no drinking. For me, it's the no 3 strikes, you're out, et cetera, et cetera. I like to develop those together as like ground rules. Like hey, you've been here for a day, can anyone tell me some basic ground rules for Cruise Moab? Hey, Stephanie, you go. And we kind of develop them together. Generally, that kind of, I think, adds a little buy-in versus just saying, all right, listen up, guys. There'll be no drinking here, and there'll be no cryptobiotic soil stepping on, y'all. So anyways, that's why I'm going through doing it right after introductions. I like to develop those ground rules.
Mm-hmm. So other bullet points of the driver's meeting, this is just good review at this point. Identify communications, what frequency and or channel you're going to be using in the case of FRS. Identify what we're going to do in the case of an emergency. I would always ask the trail leader be that first point of contact for an emergency because you've got the inReach. You have all the phone numbers on your document in the trail packet. You're going to cover a quick route and rough itinerary, kind of what's going to happen throughout the day so everyone knows I'm on the right trail and this is when I can expect to be done and have lunch. Tread lightly. I know we hammered on that one real good. Trail etiquette and safety. I think we're feeling good. I haven't seen any questions pop up on that one. A roll call. Kind of, you've already done that with your waivers. You ran through the roster, but that's a good time, maybe a last minute one. And ask somebody if you're missing a participant, say, hey, does anyone know Jennifer in the Forerunner? Do we know where she's at? Is anyone familiar? They may say, oh yeah, I know her. They're not coming today. They're not making it. They decided to do something else today. So good group conversation. And then just lay down those ground rules. Jackson says you do it in a really nice way.
One last thing is every now and again, I get somebody that doesn't understand the concept or doesn't want to air down. And it could be because they don't have the tools to air down or to air back up. And so as a trail leader, this is another thing, maybe a personal thing. I'll always offer my compressor to somebody that wants to air down but can't because they don't have a way to air back up. You can pull your crew. I always try to explain, for the most of the trails that I lead usually pretty easy trails. I always say I air down for comfort because it's a lot more comfortable. Rarely am I airing down for more traction. There are some exceptions in Moab for sure and everywhere, but if you've got somebody that's not airing down, you might just say, hey, do you want to air down? Do you need the tools? And two, if they say, oh no, I don't need to air down, I'm not worried about traction, you can say, well, it's a lot more comfy. Just make them feel like it's okay to air down. That's where I'm going with that.
Good point. Yeah, great point. A couple questions came up or just popped up that and maybe the way to phrase the question is, where does everybody go in your lineup? Sometimes it's just going to be first come, first serve. So you line up in the front as the trail leader, and as everybody rolls in, they're naturally behind you. Tail gunner obviously has a role at the very back, but don't be afraid as a trail leader to politely or suggest that maybe somebody that's less familiar with their vehicle, less familiar with the terrain or the technical driving, to have them right behind you so you can kind of keep a closer eye on them. And somebody brought up, I think it was maybe Neil that mentioned it's a really good line, a really good idea to have similar vehicles stacked up together, especially for maybe a little more novice driver or beginner, that they have an understanding of, hey, I'm going to follow an 80 series because I'm driving an 80 series. I'm going to watch how they chose their line and follow a very similar one. That works really well and can prevent a lot of trail slowdown problems, is having them kind of paired up with similar vehicles.
And the reason why it's good to make this suggestion at your trailhead meeting is that when you filter out of the trailhead, it's a lot easier to maneuver vehicles around than once you get onto the trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Yeah. I think we've hammered like what's happening in this big, massive meeting. This thing only needs to be 10 or 15 minutes, not like an hour and a half like we've made it tonight.
Yeah. The last thing I was going to throw out there. He's got one more. Yeah. This is right before this is a great time to go and look at the vehicles and make sure that they're appropriate for the trail you're getting ready to ride.
Yep. Question.
What do we got? Where do you sign up as a tail gunner? You're going to want to contact Lisa Jordan. I don't have it. Let's see, Matt Farr, do you have the email address for the trail leader, trail gunner sign up? And if you could chuck that up there, that would be awesome.
Yep, the Jordans are handling that. Maybe you could toss that email in there so you can get signed up, or let them know you're willing to at least, and what kind of trails you're possibly capable or comfortable tail gunning for. Cool. The timer stuff that you're going to do, we got the meeting all handled. We got the pre-stuff you're doing the night before.
Everybody knows what frequency you're supposed to be on.
Yeah. What are we doing throughout the day as a trail leader? What are the bare minimums you ought to consider doing?
Absolutely. I'm super talkative on the radio as a trail leader. Some people don't like that. Some people do. I like to kind of study the areas that I'm going into. So throughout the day, I'll be kind of chattering on the radio. Like I'll use Dome Plateau again because there's a really long drive before you hit the trail. I love to use that time. We do a real quick, sign the waivers. We do a real quick meeting, and then we get on the road and we do our introductions over the radio on the highway. It helps eat up some time, helps people get used to being on the radio and talking, etc. So that's kind of how I start the day on trails like that.
Yep. Encourage communications on the radio throughout the day. Nobody should feel embarrassed to hop on and ask a question. And as a trail leader, actually kind of makes the day fun if people are interested in hearing about maybe some facts if you know them, or some historical points, or at least just kind of build some camaraderie and talk. It gets a little stagnant if no one talks all day. You just have like this kind of really mundane conversations happening. But so try and encourage conversations. Make sure folks are staying hydrated. That's going to be a real big one. Utah is a desert, and it's a high desert. That is at elevation. And even in April, it's still going to be pretty cold there. In fact, we can get snow in April in the Moab area. So folks often feel like it's not hot out, so they don't need to hydrate. But that not how it works. And it seems like every couple years we have a heat casualty, just like minor dehydration or somebody kind of getting minor heat stroke at Cruise Moab from not staying hydrated. So trail leaders, great ideas to always remind people, hey, take a drink, or hey, offer out water bottles if you kind of see somebody maybe getting a little pre-symptoms of heat stroke or heat exhaustion.
Throughout the day, you may find yourself getting ahead of schedule or getting behind schedule, etc. Even if you have the most amazing, let's talk about fins and things. You have the most amazing lunch spot picked out that overviews the canyon and it's beautiful, and it's noon and for some reason you're an hour and a half from that lunch spot. It's okay to find another spot to have lunch. Nobody wants to be on the trail bopping around in the heat and be starving. So if you're running way behind, it's okay to pick another lunch spot and hit that as a view on the way out or something like that.
Yep. Be flexible.
Be flexible.
Yeah. Announce your departure times at stops. It's a really big one. When you roll into a stop, I like to say, hey, let's roll out 15 minutes past like when the tail gunner gets there. You don't want to say we're going to leave in 5 because the back of the group hasn't even caught up yet. Give everyone adequate time to hop out at like a cool spot or a cool overlook or a fun photo spot. Obstacles are going to be a little different because you're working vehicles through, but particularly lunch, just be very clear with that, hey, the last vehicle rolled in at this time. Let's plan on having 45 minutes or 1 hour. That's your decision based on the pace and what you know about the trail. But let's plan on leaving, keys on, ready to roll, wheels up at this time. That way it's just very clear that you don't have half the group getting ready and half the group didn't understand when they were leaving. Just make it a very clear expectation of what time we're planning to take off. Because that's where you can lose the most amount of time during a day in a trail ride is all of those stops and it's the herding of cats, getting everyone back in their vehicles. And that's not a bad thing because everyone's out having fun and socializing and chatting, but being clear about, hey, at this time we're going wheels up. It's going to pay dividends in getting off the trail by the right time.
I like to be really passive aggressive with this, and that I'll usually do all of that stuff. I'll holler out a 5-minute warning and then I'll start my truck and move it forward so people can see like, oh, they heard a door shut, they heard an engine start. Okay, he means business. Cool. So
yeah, great question there from Nick. It said, if it rains very hard during the event, do they cancel some of the trail events? Absolutely can happen. It's pretty rare that we've had to do that at Cruise Moab that I can recall. But we've had to make some changes like in the San Rafael swell because of snow over the years. That's going to be something that's usually going to be communicated with or to you by the Cruise Moab committee. That could happen the day of, though, and you're going to need to use your best judgment. Certainly, if you don't feel safe leading the group because of weather, make that call the morning of as early as possible. Let's try and solve that, see if there's an alternate trail or an alternate trail leader or somebody to maybe help you with that. But yeah, that can happen, sure.
Well, last up throughout the day is to keep it light and fun. I'm going to use a Billism. Keep the F in fun.
Keep the F in fun. Okay.
Keep the F in fun.
That is fun.
So yeah, nobody likes a big grumpy McGrumpy pants. So
you're not necessarily. Yeah, we've got the tail end here. We're not necessarily finished after you get off the trail at the very tail end. Jackson kind of alluded to earlier that it's a great idea if you have air and a good air source. Help share that with any participants that may not. Maybe they don't have a compressor or they didn't. Theirs isn't as fast. Hang out till that last person's aired up, and you don't need to leave as a group. It's appropriate depending on the trail, depending on the situation. At the end of the trail, you say trail's over. Thanks everybody. I mean, shake hands. Hopefully everybody had a great time. They can maybe as a group you can talk about some of their favorite things or things that maybe didn't go well that you can improve upon. But everybody can kind of filter out and leave at their own pace from there. You don't need a convoy back to town, but make sure that you're the last person, preferably you and or the trail gunner are the last ones leaving the parking lot, so somebody doesn't get stuck there with a vehicle that won't fire back up or something happened.
Yep.
That's the last one I've got, air up.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we hammered.
Cool. So, yep, follow-up meeting and air up. On some trails, I like to do a little Q&A afterwards. Especially if I notice that somebody was having like a rough time, like maybe I'll go over and be like, hey, like, you doing all right? You know, it's a good time to get feedback at the end of the trail.
I encourage people to look over their vehicle as well.
Yeah.
Just like do a walk around, do a quick once over, look at things like tie rods and ball joints and control arms and make sure nothing's loose or broken or bent before they hop on the highway. Maybe less of a deal for those that are right close to Moab, but if they've got a big haul back to town, San Rafael Swells, Cocopelli's, certainly Elephant Hill, you've got an hour plus on the highway, have everybody do a walk around and make sure it's ready to go back to town too.
Absolutely. And we probably touched on this, but I can't think of when we did. If you have to be really assertive with somebody on your trail ride, I've had to, in 10 years of trail leadership at Cruise Moab, I've had to do this twice, where I'm just like, hey man, you're not trying that again. You're getting back in line and it's not in the best interest of the group for you to try doing that again. So if you can make it not about you, but about the rest of the group getting back on time or getting back safely, that tends to be the best way to do it that I've found in the 2 times I've had to do it in my
pretty rare scenario
Cruise Moab career. But don't be afraid to be assertive when you need to be. And if you need to be, don't do it in front of everybody. Just go over and tell that person what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. We've got a few more minutes, at least 5, 10. If you have questions, why don't you start tossing them in the chat there now? Looks like Mr. Knackman tossed one in there about like recapping any significant recovery events, what worked, etc. We've had a handful. Usually it's on like the trails I've been doing, the swell particularly, it's going to be things like a broken differential. Had a fronts and rears and a handful there, maybe some broken steering. We've usually always been able to, I would call it like field triage those to where they can finish even the trail day with us, maybe in 2-wheel drive, or at least drive their own vehicle back to camp and back to Moab. Haven't, knock on wood, had any on that trail that we've had to like tow or have formally trailered back. But there is a trailer. I mentioned the recovery team earlier. There is a truck and trailer that's kind of designated on behalf of Rising Sun. They set that up so that if there's a vehicle that can't make it back to Old Spanish Trail, they'll work with you to get it back there. They're not going to deliver it to your house in Colorado or your house in California. You're going to need to work that out, but they'll get it back to Cruise Moab HQ for you. That's a good question. You got any other recovery recaps?
Not really.
We've had rollovers. They're rare. I mean, nobody wants that to happen on your trail ride. You as a trail leader certainly don't, but anything can happen. This is outdoors, and there's some inherent danger in off-roading vehicles. That would probably be the catastrophe. I take that back. We did have a Cruise Moab where we had a roll that I was part of, that we had a rollover, and we rolled the vehicle back onto its wheels. It was a 40 series. We let it sit and did all the things to properly set it up to run. And we took the driver out of the vehicle and had them ride with somebody else. They were pretty shaken up. And we designated somebody from our group, actually my co-driver, to drive their vehicle out of the trail. And they actually drove it back home too, all the way back into at least Moab, where they were able to get on their trailer. So
we got Boyd saying, "Show us the trucks!" Exclamation point.
Okay, that's all anyone wants to see is the trucks. They're done with us, and I don't blame you. So thank you for bearing this long. We should be giving out a prize for hanging in with us this long.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any new ones popping up on there, but there's a little bit of latency. So throw a question if you can. Otherwise, Jackson will lift up the camera and show you everything.
Yeah.
See,
do you want to
saying,
unplug this thing and do a little walk around, do you think? Or?
Oh man, we could try. That could be a little dangerous.
Yeah.
Sure,
if it shuts down, it shuts down.
Yeah, if it dies, it dies. And you got to come visit. So big thanks to the Land Cruiser Heritage Museum for letting Jackson and I have the place for the night. Dan, we didn't do anything to your desk. It's all good to go. But this is an amazing facility. If you've never been, come visit. There's about 100 Land Cruisers in here right now. Pretty cool place.
I'll hop on later and I'll start or if somebody wants to that's already on here, Andy or Matt or somebody, start a thread under the Cruise Moab for trail leader questions. That way we have a little repository to put any questions that might stem out of all this.
Yeah, I did see a question pop up. Worst case scenario, what if you have an unruly participant? That's a tough one, because that's going to be really a judgment call. And I would just say that pull that person aside, work on that with your trail gunner, and decide what's going to be the best course of action. We don't want to leave anybody behind, even if they're being unruly. Maybe you expedite the trail, and maybe the entire trail needs to end a little early. Unfortunate for the rest of your group, but if it's like a human safety issue or a health of the entire group because of one unruly participant, you're going to have to make that kind of call, or just invite them maybe to take an alternate and have your tail gunner follow them back to the highway and say, hey, it's not working out. But that's a really rare scenario. I don't know that I've never run across that. Definitely maybe had people that they don't like me or didn't love my style or vice versa, and you try to work through it. But I've never had anybody I've had to send home. Have you like flat out?
Not send home.
Yeah.
I've had just one experience where it was close to that. But people tend to, especially, this is like the passive aggressive trick, which is to make it about the rest of the group, not about me as a trail leader, about them and their driving style or whatever it is that's
good call,
causing you heartburn. Just say, hey, it's really like, it'd be awesome for you to come back after you've done this trail and try that obstacle again for the 18th time. But for the interest of the group and getting back on time to get back to the raffle and have a cold one with our buddies, why don't you hop back in line and you could even throw out, oh man, on Sunday I'll come back out here and run it with you.
Yep.
and show you the line, and then you ditch them on Sunday. I'm just kidding.
That's a great point. I did have that scenario on Hell's Revenge, that I actually told some of our participants that I would go back in after our trail ride ended. We got done pretty early because we were moving smooth. They wanted to try some of the a little harder lines and harder obstacles. I said, hey, I'll run back in with you. It's easy enough for a small group, and then we can go spend plenty of time. And then anyone from our group that wants to, but that's now an extracurricular run. That's kind of just us doing our own thing. On the note of extracurricular runs, there was some discussion there about, hey, when's a great time to do some pre-running? And that's early on in the week before Cruise Moab officially kicks off. There's always a handful of participants that get there early, some of the trail leaders, some of the Cruise Moab staff, and like to go pre-run trails or spend a little bit of time out before kind of everything gets busy for the official event. So that's a great time. And I'd say you could organize some of that on the Rising Sun Forum. Hop on there and say, hey, I'm going to be in Cruise Moab on Monday. Anyone want to go hit a trail?
And there is kind of like a group going out there already that has plans in early March. I can't remember the exact dates. But check out check out the Rising Sun Forum. It's got all those dates on there and all of the organizational stuff that you need to know to go out there and pre-run with the Rising Sun.
Cool. Yeah, it looks like quite a few people have said they're going to be there early on in the week. They're going to try and be there Monday. So you could get some fun little adventure in early on, little lower, little different event. Then the big event kicks off and you're all prepared.
Dude, I think we ought to show some of these trucks off.
We need to. Yep.
All right. We're gonna unplug my computer if it shuts off. You guys are all awesome. Thank you for sticking with us. But we're about to see some really cool trucks. You want to take that since you're going to be explaining, Mr. Explainer?
I'm not going to walk. See us here? Okay, this is really awkward, but Jackson insists on doing it. So we're here at the Land Cruiser Heritage Museum here in Salt Lake City. I would encourage all of you to come join. It's an amazing collection of all things Land Cruisers, from vehicles. It's kind of hard to see over there. The very end there, that actually predates the name Land Cruiser, so you won't see it on there all the way. And then working on the 20 series and everything from kind of, let's see, this is hard to show in the row, so we will have to walk. We're gonna have to do some walking here, but we've got 20 series, including some amazing 28s, soft top, 2-door, 4-door.
I'm gonna throw up watching this, Kurt.
Is it hard to watch that way? Okay. And then we kick off with the 40 series. And this is my favorite part, is kind of stand right here, because everything from right here, and I hope this, is that like zoomed out enough? Okay, yeah. Perfect. Everything from this 40 series all the way down to the end. You can see the mustard 42 down there, and then across the aisle and all the way back here is different renditions, different models, different trims of the 40 series. So we've got 40, 41, 42s, 43s, 44s, 45s, 46, and 47, including 45 LVs or 45 long beds or 45 short beds. So really amazing collection of vehicles throughout here.
So many time capsules in here. Like if you have a project that you're working on and restoring, and you haven't been out to the Heritage Museum to see what it actually looked like from the factory,
it's the way to do it.
That's one reason to come out here.
This one's ready to restore. See, they're not all perfectly pristine. That one's got a really neat story. You'll have to come visit. But we have soft tops, hard tops, like OE soft tops versus aftermarket ones, a little bit of a collection of everything, really dusty ones. Some Prados hiding right back in there. Got a couple 90s and a 150 series, a Heritage 200. How far are we going to go? We're going to do a whole walk here.
Why not?
I guess. If everyone's sticking with us, we'll do it. So we go a little out of order. That's just because of the space that it takes to have all the vehicles in here. So 55s are hiding over in the corner there. We'll get to those because there's a really cool Moab one. But then we've got the 60s. So we've got 60, 61, 62, including like the awesome, the super low mile HJ61 JDM spec, turbo diesel, factory lockers front and rear, factory winch, super cool model. Some really clean US spec 60 series and 62. Some really built ones. That's a Profits build. That one's been at Cruise Moab many times over the years. It's for sale, by the way. You can see it on the website. Let's sneak this way.
Yep.
This is one of the newest additions to the museum. It's a URJ 200, but this holds the current speed record for the SUV class. Really cool. Those are giant turbos down there. Two big turbos, the 3 URFE motor.
Horsepower, is that right? Give or take?
Sounds right. It's a lot of horsepowers. This is a cool new, so these are two new ones at the museum. This is the Jack Cars FJ62, but from the movie Terminal List, from the series Terminal List. So really cool on Amazon. Yeah, you can watch this one. So this is actually the prop from the video. He's a total cruiser head and was generously offered this to have on display here in the museum. So really a fun one you can see on TV. We've got the PX10. We've got a Trail Team Edition FJ Cruiser, and then a couple Bondurantes. So let's head this other way because we still got a ton to cover.
Fastest tour Kurt's ever given.
This is the fastest. This was Jackson's I did, by the way. We got some motors. They're kind of cool to see all the different variations. There's a few others hiding through the museum.
There's a brand new 94. Oh, never mind.
And then you got a Maltec 200 series. These are really cool builds, all built on 0 mile or low mile, super low mile Heritage Edition 200s. That's a full camper conversion. All the goods to travel around the globe. Front and rear locking differentials, lower gears, full dual fuel tanks. They've got it all. And then our beautiful 50 series collection. I say 50 series because we have not only 55s, 2 of those, but the 56. JDM spec only. You could get a 56. In this case, a fire truck. They could be military vehicles and others. I know this is shaky, so I apologize. Somebody said a bezel's upside down. We better go find it. These are 2 really cool 55s, and one that I think is fun to talk about is this cool tag-along Expedition 55, because that lived all of its life in the Moab area. That's a 1978. It's got a fair bit of patina on it when you look close, because that hauled hikers and bikers and rafting trips all over the Moab area as a support vehicle. So it's a really cool trim. It looked like in its heyday down there on the poster. So kind of a fun one. So we jumped from 40s to 50s, 60s, and then we've got our 80s. Some really cool ones. Somebody's going to maybe say that that's a misprint, a 2007 FCJ80, but that's not. That is a knockdown model that was assembled in Venezuela, and that is a 2007. And that particular vehicle has 78 miles on it. So like 000, 078. So 80, less than 80 original miles on it on a brand new Land Cruiser. Of course, you have to have a 40th anniversary. An FJ80, one of the faster ones in the museum. I kid. A diesel 80 series. This is kind of a really cool trim level one with the vinyl seats, right-hand drive, Australia spec. And then everything else from here down, with the very exception of the Q-Tuck on the very end, is a 70 series. So if you...
for all those that say that they never brought a 70 series to the United States, you're correct, but there's a lot of them here.
But there's some here. Yeah, these are beautiful. So it goes in order of wheelbase, basically kind of in series. So 70, 71, 72, 73. We actually don't have a 72 here right now, but 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79 we have. So kind of one of every major configuration. Short wheelbase, mid wheelbase with the FRP fiberglass top or the canvas top. A custom in-house body built 4-door. A really clean 74. It's another really cool Profits build here on the 75. 75 Troopy fire truck. A very Australian one with the tracker top and the pop-top camper. A very beautiful built South American. That's got the 1FZ in it. Cool truck. And then these are beauties. These are worth stopping for. This is a 2015 GRJ 76. So this is a brand new at the time was a brand new for the 30th anniversary. The 70 came out in 85, so in 2015 this was the 30th. So that's a 4.0 gas-powered 76 series. So it's got the 4-door. Uh-oh. I'm stretching the cable, we said. Factory winch, factory front and rear locking differentials. That's just a beautiful truck. And another way to have one of those, this is an 80 series chassis, but a 76 body. It's a cool way to build one that's US legal because it's built on a 25-year-old chassis. And we got the 77, the 78, the 79. That was another cool Profits build one there. And then we've got a really stock again 79 series, and these have 6 and 7 kilometers on them. So they've just never been even dealer preps. They'll have plastic on them, brand new. And then a cool mine truck that's got a lot more miles on it, even though that's only 10 years old, 12 years old now. And then a Q truck down on the end. So covered all the older stuff. Now we gotta head back this way and jump over to the new stuff. So enjoy the views. I apologize if it's wavy. Are people still hanging in there?
Yeah, man.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for hanging in. We're going to sneak over here.
We got some Cruiser Outfitters fans out there.
Woo, thanks, guys. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's jump over. Cruiser Outfitters, we can say that we've been involved in the museum since day one.
Oh, hang on, we had somebody that just said no audio.
Uh-oh.
Can someone give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
No audio.
Thumbs up for audio, thumbs down for no audio. If they can't hear us, that should be an obvious thing too.
Yeah.
Okay, we got good audio.
Got audio, okay. So we're back through our 40 series here, and we kind of pick up the story. We have the 90s down there, the Prados I mentioned, but you really pick up the story with the 100 series. And we've got both the early and later models of the 100s for the US spec. So this is a little bit different trim, an 04 and an 06, obviously a very built one. And then we've got the non-US 105. So this one's got the solid axle. It's a 1FZ, very low trim level, pretty interesting model, steel wheels, not full color code. Jackson's telling me where to point the camera, sorry. And then we get into the 200 series. We've got a VDJ200, which is the twin turbo diesel, 1VD FTV. It's an amazing diesel platform. And then, of course, the US spec, and this is a Heritage Edition, kind of the last of for the 200 series here in the US before we get to see an LC250. So we'll have to make room one day when the new one comes in here.
Heck yeah.
And then we got to go over kind of the special vehicles. By the way, that's a giant map of Utah. If you're not familiar with where Moab is, we're up here in Salt Lake, but we'll be coming to Moab. Hope you can see that right there. It's a good place. So all the trails are in that area. We've got an Icon, which is, they call it their FJ44, kind of a long wheelbase 4-door. Got the amazing Expedition 7 fleet. You can learn more about these and all the vehicles on the Land Cruiser Heritage Museum's website. This vehicle in particular, its name is Fernway, and that has driven on all 7 continents. It's a pretty amazing feat. That vehicle crossed 6 of those and then went to Antarctica and actually did a drive there. But there's an Arctic truck down on the end that actually crossed the continent. And then behind me, starting down on the end with a 20 series, work our way all the way up through, is all the cool fire trucks. So a really cool collection. They're a little out of order. I think we need to move one of those around because the 20 series is there, but you can see all the cool order of them, from the 40 pickup truck, the European 55 fire truck, a 60 series fire truck, a 70 series. And one day, hopefully, we'll have an 80 series and a 100 series and a 200 fire truck. They exist. They're just still in service. And kind of the last 2 we'll highlight is the Mega Cruiser. This is a BXD-10 military version. And then it's BXD-20 sibling, which is the civilian version. They are cruisers. They're not land cruisers, but they are cruisers. So they're kind of part of the story. And they do share a lot of parts with land cruisers as you look through and climb around them. But 37-inch tires from the factory, portal reduction hubs, 4-wheel steering, locked front and rear. Really cool vehicles, but they're really wide. They're big machines. They were primarily set up to be troop transport. You can kind of see the way this one's set up. It hauls 10 people in seatbelts. That's it. That's all I got. That was a quick tour.
All right.
Does anybody, any complaints?
I keep lowering the
Dan
computer
says
like
the 45's on the end because it goes in and out sometimes. That's right. I do recall that. So that's why they're out of order. Dan's doing a great job. He didn't forget the order.
Will you look at the Arctic truck really quick?
Oh, yeah, let's do.
Yeah.
This is an Arctic Truck AT44, and it's built on a 2013 Hilux chassis. And this is a very remarkable vehicle because of where it's been, which is it's crossed Antarctica all the way out to the Ross Ice Shelf. And then it also did the only crossing, driven crossing of the long axis of Greenland. So from basically Earth to Earth across Greenland. So pretty amazing what this truck has done. It's got a lot of cool equity in it, as does the rest of the E7 fleet here. I'll turn around. And we do have this cool little one down there in the end too. A lot of people will say, well, that's not a Land Cruiser. And you're right, it's not. But it does have an F motor. So it's Land Cruiser engine powered. And that's a pumper trailer. So that would have been used by a fire department to move water from the source to the fire. And it's powered by an early F motor. I'll sneak in here to hopefully not take a finger off to do so, but there's a really early F motor. So kind of cool. A fun little overview of what it looks like from this corner.
Watch out for that stinger. It'll get you.
It'll get you. Any other questions, comments, complaints? Go to Jackson.
Yep. And I forward those to Kurt.
Perfect. Thanks. Awesome, Dan.
Saved us $10.
F95. Yeah, Dan.
Nobody saved $10 with this. You need to come here and see these vehicles for real. And also the Land Cruiser Heritage Museum operates on donations, and those donations help keep the lights on and keep cool stuff rolling in. So not only is it rad that we have all of this cool history with us, but you'll get to talk to see Dan and hear all about it when you show up and come and visit here.
That's right. If you come, Dan will give you a personal tour. That's my personal guarantee for you. And if Dan's not available, I love doing tours on nights and weekends as well. But Dan does an amazing job. Jules is here in the day too, and she also does a fantastic job.
So. And it was very rad of them to let us use this as our background prop, and it's always fun to come here and visit too.
Yep. Well, I think we can shut it down. They don't need to walk back with us. Everybody good? No more questions? Okay, thank you, everybody. We really look forward to seeing you at Cruise Moab to have a great event, and you're going to have a great time being a trail leader or a tail gunner. It's going to work out well.
And throw any questions you have up on the Rising Sun forum, and we'll try to get them answered as we can. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.